This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode, an episode for entrepreneurs, business owners, people to hear about things on the cutting edge. And today's talk is really going to be, I've found a very interesting guest. His name is Chris Valdheims, coming from Southern California, and he's a lawyer for creatives, which is going to be a really interesting discussion on how the law has shifted in this creative economy. We'll talk a little bit about digital copyrights, royalties, intellectual property law, the impact of AI, as well as a little bit of this technology called non-fungible tokens. And I'm really excited to get into the conversation. So Chris, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to talking with you about all of this stuff. It's great.
Yeah. Talk about your background, your journey, where you went to school, where you worked, and how you got into this creative lawyer movement.
Yeah, so I got into the creative lawyer movement because I'm a creative myself. So even before being a lawyer, I was a web developer and a designer for a long time. And I actually became a lawyer later in life. This is my second career. So it was interesting. In law school, I had this moment where I think it was in contracts class. And I'm like, if I had known this stuff as a creative, my life would have been so much easier. So at that point, I'm like, well, how can I communicate what I'm learning here to other creatives that I know? And I went to school at UCLA, and a lot of the direction there was, okay, work for a big law firm and work for large companies, which is great. Obviously that's needed. But my interest was, I want to work with, I'm in Los Angeles. There's a lot of creative people doing a lot of interesting things. And I'm like, that's who I want to work for and work with. And now I see myself often as a co-creator. Like I'm helping put in place those legal structures that's going to help people have their businesses thrive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And I like to kind of zoom out a little bit because I read this article when I was in medical school in the early 2000s, and it was talking about law students suing their law schools because they couldn't find a job. And to me, that signified the law profession is changing, and people were saying like lawyers are going to be obsolete. You're not going to need a lawyer. AI is coming. I see the same thing for physicians too, by the way. So, talk about how the legal profession is changing, because the other interesting thing is you have I love the law because it's a system of checks and balances. So whenever the executive branch or, whatever Congress gets out of hand, the law can step in and say, no, you're wrong, or they can set precedent. So talk how this legal is changing in this rapidly evolving environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think things like AI are definitely things to account for. And, kind of going back, I graduated at the time, I graduated in 2012. So that was probably the worst time to graduate and look for a job, which is exactly why I started my firm. The jobs I was finding, I wasn't liking them. So I'm like, I'll start my own firm. I'd had a business before, so I knew how to do it. I knew that it's not just about the services you provide, but marketing and sales and fulfillment, all this other stuff. So I started my own firm. And I think, kind of fast forward to today, what I find a lot of people are looking for is, yes, there's AI, and maybe you can go into ChatGPT and get an accurate answer. But what a lot of people want is reassurance. So I often, people really want to feel like I'm doing this right, and that often takes talking with a person. It often takes talking with someone who has a license to lose. Ultimately, ultimately that potential is other people's benefit, because I have to be really careful. I have to make sure that if you're my client, I'm telling you the right thing. I can't just say, oh, well, I think it's this or I think it's that. Good luck. I have to really get it right. And I'm sure you're familiar with that being a doctor. Like we have malpractice and stuff, which is like really focuses us on giving the right answer. So for a lot of my clients, it's not just about there's like a clean legal answer. So, well, what do I do? I don't know. I've never started a business. What do I need to know? What am I not thinking about? That's also a big one too. If you think about AI, that's assuming you know the right questions to ask.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And how do you balance this dichotomy? Because the law is really slow, and you got the courts, and you have a judge, and they gotta make decisions and juries. But then you've got this Twitter speed economy, where
Mm.
information and everything is like rapid. It's like in milliseconds, microseconds. So how does the law keep up with that? Or that's why I'm presuming you have like creative law, entertainment law, intellectual property law, those things. Is that?
Yeah, it does take a while. You're right. Like the law does take a while because it's usually it's very reactive in the sense of the technology occurs and then Congress or whoever decides, oh, we need to pass a law about it. So there's a gap. Or if something comes out and then, there's cases. So AI would be a good example. I'm sure you've heard that pretty much every AI company is being sued by somebody, whether it's authors or photographers or whoever, for training. Now, I've had clients ask me about that. Well, what's going to happen because of that? And I'm like, I don't know. But what I do know is there are principles underneath all of it. So I can kind of tell you, like, here's the outer bounds of what can happen. And this is what I'm saying with law. It's sometimes it's not even like a black or white answer. It's kind of knowing it's almost like probabilities, like generalized probabilities. Like, if you do this, it's probably going to be okay. Investment. If you invest in a stock, if you think about it, we don't know what it's going to do, but we can probably bet some are going to go up and some are going to go down in general. And we make those bets. So yes, there are answers, but there are things like, again, AI is the perfect example of like, there's so many unknowns, and I'll tell people we need to see how these cases play out. Because there's no laws on the book that I could point to and be like, oh, in this case they decided this, and that's that's precedent that we're following going into your situation. So I'm like, well, yeah, it could be either or. And so sometimes it's even like risk tolerance. Like it's my clients, like, are you really risk tolerant or not? If you're not risk tolerant, here's what you do. If you are, here's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I have is where do you see this intersection between entertainment law? Because I know a lot of like one of my good friends, he went to law school and he went into entertainment law, and now he's like a agent for celebrities and actors. Of course, that's going to change, but how do you see this intersection between entertainment law and intellectual property law? Because I have another friend that also went into IP law. So how are you seeing that?
So like whenever we talk about entertainment law and intellectual property, and this is what I tell, even down to like small level. So like even if you're like a self-published author who's selling 300 copies of a book, your asset is the intellectual property that you've created. So it's that book you've written, it's the brand you might have built. So like if you have, a series of books that have a title or a series of videos or a platform that has a title, that's your IP. And then the art and the kind of science becomes, okay, how do you turn that into, like, how do you take that asset and leverage it into other things? So, if you think about something like a comic book, like, Marvel Comics has been around for decades, it's been leveraged into Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is very valuable entertainment property. So for any creator, it's you create something, and once you've created it, you're like, now how do I leverage that and collect the value that's created from that?
Yeah. Yeah. Question is, because you mentioned, like for example, the content from New York Times suing OpenAI because they're using the data for training, and then you also had this the actors strike that was like the big thing at South by Southwest was, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a lawyer, or creative, how are you gonna I hate to say it, but how are you going to profit from all this mess? How can you position yourself, with AI and, entertainment, intellectual property, all of this stuff? What are some of the areas?
Yeah, so what I've told a lot of people, and might be more just my opinion from seeing so many businesses, we start with, I tell people, if you're an artist, if you're a creator, if you're a creative, it's going to become more about you as the brand, meaning that people want to buy from people they can relate to. They want to support people they can relate to. And yeah, maybe AI makes your process faster or cheaper, but ultimately, we want to connect with other people. I mean, like that's why I'm here talking to you and not just talking to an AI. People want to hear from you and they want to hear from me. This is never going to change. And so I think I tell any creator, make sure that you're putting yourself and your brand and your point of view up front. AI can't replicate that. AI can assist you in disseminating that and creating products from it. But if you have a point of view or if you have a platform, that's what's going to always be valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, just kind of creative destruction, which is what we're seeing here. We're kind of in the middle of it. You're in the middle of it. And what's interesting is I talked to one guest and he was saying that because he's an agent for celebrities and actors, he was saying as an agent, even AI is taking him out. So he has to think more like an entrepreneur, and which is what you've been doing. And from what I gathers kind of the legal profession, the medical profession, we're still in this kind of industrial age where we're still, depending on things and kind of how do you feel the need to think of yourself as an entrepreneur as with lawyer skills as opposed to just being a lawyer?
Yeah, it's definitely that. And I've always looked at it that way. And so for me, it's really how do I deliver what people want in a way that they want it, and take away the things that we just take for granted. So for me, that was, in law, it was always about hourly billing. Up in, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you wanted to hire a lawyer, your only option was hire a lawyer who bills you hourly. So one of the things we did is we moved to flat fees pretty quickly. We have a legal subscription. So these are things that I'm basically responding to what the market wants. And I've always been an entrepreneur. So I kind of look at like, okay, yes, I'm a lawyer and I have to be a lawyer in order to manage this company that I have. But ultimately, I want to know, like, what do people want and how do I give that to them? And it's then coordinating everything. And, for me, AI is not a threat. I can maybe pull in AI. I'm like, okay, we can make a really good GPT that can answer questions like we would. We'll throw all our content in there and we'll train it to answer exactly as we would, and maybe give people a caveat, hey, that's going to give you 80% of the answer, then have a phone call with us to get that last 20% kind of thing. So I find it really interesting. And there's going to be lawyers who resist that. There are people who are like, I want to do things the way I've always done it. That's fine. Their fate might be sealed. Who knows?
Yeah, it's I'm just there was this article about United asking its pilots to take time off, like unpaid time off because of this Boeing mess. But one thing that I'd love to ask you is what's special about how you work with creatives who want to get the legal stuff right? Like what is that extra sauce?
So the extra sauce is the fact that everybody who works at our firm are creatives themselves. So that's really the thing. And we don't ever give legal advice in a vacuum. There's a lot of lawyers who are like, well, I'm a lawyer. I can only really think in terms of the law. I'm thinking in terms of, all right, you're asking me these questions, not because this is not just like an exercise, not an intellectual exercise. You're asking me because your goal is to create a business out of the, out of your creative work, which is something that I've done, which is something that I do, which is something that I can pass on. And, I've even, I'll have conversations with my clients about pricing, for instance, something that I've had experience with or my clients have had experience with, which isn't traditionally what a lawyer would talk about. Normally, they're like, well, it's a business decision. I'm not going to answer that. I'll tell them, here's what I know. Here's what I can share. And the answer is I know a lot. I've been doing this for a long time. So it's really just moving outside of the traditional role of a lawyer, and offering more. Just being overall, I think going back to what lawyers I think were or should have been, which is overall just generalized counsel. And I tell people like the lawyers are like the original business coaches because we have an ethical obligation. It's not just about like, oh, I'm going to sell a course and hustle people, but like, I have a license. If I do that, at some point the bar is going to be like, you're not giving good advice. You shouldn't be a lawyer.
Which is really interesting. And my follow-up question is, what's this idea of, what is something that creative entrepreneurs often get wrong about working with a lawyer? Like, what should they be, especially creatives, what are the key things that they should be looking at, asking the lawyer the questions before hiring, all of that?
So I think the main thing, a lot of entrepreneurs, and over the time I've been a lawyer, people have gotten better. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they think of lawyer and like lawsuit and I'm getting sued. That's when you hire a lawyer. That's exactly the wrong time to hire a lawyer. And the example I use, maybe you'll be able to relate to this. It's like dealing with your health needs when you're in the operating room. We want to take care of that beforehand. We want to, and so the equivalent of that would be, let's eat healthy, let's exercise, let's make sure that we're taking care of any kind of conditions we have so it doesn't turn into something. Because most people, I think, just because of media and the way lawyers are portrayed, only think about lawyers in terms of going to court and getting sued. And that's the expensive way to do things. I mean, it's magnitudes different. If you go to court, you might be looking at spending six figures on something versus if you take care of it early, if you say, hey, I'm starting a business, let me talk to a lawyer and find out what I need to do and how to do it. Maybe you're spending a few $1,000s.
Yeah, so well said. I know we touched upon this in the back room, and again, none of this is advice. We're just talking concepts. But there's this new technology called non-fungible tokens, and it's like I said, it's it was really hyped up a couple of years ago, and now I think it's still an interesting technology. And I know you don't give advice, but you have thoughts on like where this non-fungible tokens and artists and creator rights and royalties. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, so for me, non-fungible tokens have been interesting and I've paid attention to it, and at the risk of maybe making a section of any audience upset, and I'll probably hear from people. Sometimes I don't see it. I don't see what problem it's trying to solve that hasn't already been solved. So when we talk about like things like royalties, I'm like, oh, we already have a structure for that. It's called royalty payments and agreements to pay royalties. Like we don't actually need any technology to do that. We have authentication, we have all these other things. And so for me, I'm waiting to see how it evolves. I think it's still in early stages. I definitely don't write it off. But at the same time, I think some of it, and I've seen a lot of kind of big mishaps. I don't know if you ever heard about the people who bought a copy of the book Dune and thought that, oh, that's going to give me the rights. So I'll make it an NFT, and then it's going to give me the rights to make a movie. They found out from Dune's lawyers, whoever controls that intellectual property, no, that's not how it works. It's not an end run around IP in any way. So what I tell people is, NFTs are great, but also make sure you understand the fundamental principles. It's not an end run around anything, really. And I think some people are looking at it to be that, and that's where they run into problems.
Yeah, it's really in its nascent stages, and like especially like the fees on Ethereum, and so expensive, it kind of defeats the purpose, like you were saying. But it's interesting because there was this book by Chris Dixon talking about Web3 and talking about how middlemen could be eliminated with blockchain technologies, non-fungible tokens being one of those. Which is, like I said, it's still early, but it's an interesting idea where you're direct artist to creator, bam, you don't have to go through a studio or a publishing group. You can go directly to your fans. How can people contact you? Seek your advice, work with you, follow your socials, etc.
Yeah, so the best way to find us is counselforcreators.com. That's our website. You can find everything you need there. There's a button if someone's inspired to connect with us and book a discovery call. There's a big button that says, hey, connect with us if people have questions. And, I tell anybody like these discovery calls, we can just kind of figure out like what people need. So that's what we do. If people aren't ready for that, totally fine. We have a blog. We are pretty active on TikTok and Instagram as Counsel for Creators. So if you should look for Counsel for Creators on Instagram or TikTok, we're always posting stuff just about legal because, I often also feel like one of the things lawyers haven't done well in the past is communicate about the legal stuff. So we're trying to change that by just putting out as much free content as we can.
I love that. And it's a really burgeoning field, but it's going to be more and more important. And I love how the legal profession is adapting to these changes. I think the medical profession needs to catch up. All of Chris's resources will be in the links and show notes. Be sure to give him a like and follow on socials, and really interesting discussion. And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.